Part 2 of a reading of Plato's Timaeus, translated by Thomas Taylor. Socrates. But what other, O Critias, should we receive in preference to this? For your discourse, through a certain affinity, is particularly adapted to the present sacred rites of the goddess. And besides this, we should consider as a thing of the greatest moment that your relation is not a mere fable, but a true history. It is impossible, therefore, to say how and from whence, neglecting your narration, we should find another more convenient. Hence, it is necessary to confess that you have spoken with good fortune, and it is equally necessary that I, on account of my discourse yesterday, should now rest from speaking and be wholly attentive to yours. Critias. But now consider, Socrates, the manner of our disposing the mutual banquet of disputation. For it seems proper to us that Timaeus, who is the most astronomical of us all, and is particularly knowing in the nature of the universe, should speak the first, commencing his discourse from the generation of the world, and ending in the nature of men. But that I, after him, receiving the men which he has mentally produced, but which have been excellently educated by you, and introducing them to you according to the law of Solon as to proper judges, should render them members of this city, as being in reality no other than those Athenians which were described as unknown to us in the report of the sacred writings, and that in future we shall discourse concerning them as about the citizens and Athenians. Socrates. I seem to behold a copious and splendid banquet of disputation set before me. It is therefore now your business, O Timaeus, to begin the discourse, having first of all, as is highly becoming, invoked the gods according to law. Timaeus. Indeed, Socrates, since those who participate but the least degree of wisdom in the beginning of every undertaking, whether great or small, call upon divinity, it is necessary that we, unless we are in every respect unwise, who are about to speak concerning the universe, whether it is generated or without generation, invoking the gods and goddesses, should pray that what we assert may be agreeable to their divinities. And that in the ensuing discourse we may be consistent with ourselves. And such is my prayer to the gods. With reference to myself, but as to what respects the present company, it is necessary to pray that you may easily understand and that I may be able to explain my meaning about the proposed subjects of disputation. In the first place, therefore, as it appears to me, it is necessary to define what that is which is always real being, but is without generation, and what that is which is generated indeed, or consists in a state of becoming to be, but which never really is. It appears to me it is necessary to define what that is which is always real being, but is without generation, and what that is which is generated indeed, or consists in a state of becoming to be, but which never really is. The former of these, indeed, is apprehended by intelligence in conjunction with reason, since it always subsists according to same. But the latter is perceived by opinion in conjunction with irrational sense, since it subsists in a state of generation and corruption, and never truly is. But whatever is generated is necessarily generated from a certain cause, for it is every way impossible that anything should be generated without a cause. When, therefore, the artificer, in the fabrication of any work, looks to that which always subsists according to same, and, employing a paradigm of this kind, expresses the idea and power in his work, it is then necessary that the whole of his production should be beautiful. But when he beholds that which is in generation, and uses a generated paradigm, it is alike necessary that his work should be far from beautiful. I denominate, therefore, this universe heaven, or the world, or by any other appellation in which it may particularly rejoice. Concerning which, let us in the first place consider that which, in the proposed inquiry about the universe, ought in the very beginning to be investigated, whether it always was, having no principle of generation, or whether it was generated, commencing its generation from a certain cause. It was generated, for this universe is visible and has a body. But all such things are sensible, and sensible things are apprehended by opinion in conjunction with sense. And such things appear to have their subsistence in becoming to be, and in being generated. But we have before asserted that whatever is generated is necessarily generated from some cause. To discover, therefore, the artificer and father of the universe is indeed difficult. And when found, it is impossible to reveal him through the ministry of discourse to all men. Again, this is to be considered concerning him. I mean, according to what paradigm, extending himself, he fabricated the world. Whether towards an exemplar, subsisting according to that which is always the same, and similarly affected, or towards that which is generated. But indeed, if this world is beautiful and its artificer good, it is evident that he looked towards an eternal exemplar in its fabrication. But if the world be far from beautiful, which it is not lawful to assert, he necessarily beheld a generated instead of an eternal exemplar. But it is perfectly evident that he regarded an eternal paradigm. For the world is the most beautiful of generated natures, and its artificer is the best of causes. But, being thus generated, it is fabricated according to that which is comprehensible by reason and intelligence, and which subsists in an abiding sameness of being. And from hence it is perfectly necessary that this world should be the resemblance of something. But to describe its origin according to nature is the greatest of all undertakings. In this manner, then, we must distinguish concerning the image and its exemplar. As words are allied to the things of which they are the interpreters, hence it is necessary, when we speak of that which is stable and firm and intellectually apparent, that our reasons should be in like manner stable and immutable, and as much as possible irreprehensible, with every perfection of a similar kind. But that when we speak concerning the image of that which is immutable, we should employ only probable arguments, which have the same analogy to the former as a resemblance to its exemplar. And indeed, as essence is to generation, so is truth to faith. You must not wonder, therefore, O Socrates, since many things are asserted by many concerning the gods and the generation of the universe, if I should not be able to produce the most approved and accurate reasons on so difficult a subject. But you ought to rejoice if it shall appear that I do not employ reasons less probable than others, at the same time remembering that I who discourse and that you who are my judges possess the human nature in common. so that you should be satisfied if my assertions are but assimilative of the truth. Socrates. You speak excellently well, Timaeus, and we shall certainly act in every respect as you advise. This introduction, indeed, of your discourse we wonderfully approve. Proceed, therefore, with the subsequent disputation. Timaeus. Let us declare then on what account the composing artificer constituted generation and the universe. The artificer indeed was good, but in that which is good, envy never subsists about anything which has being. Hence, as he was entirely void of envy, he was willing to produce all things as much as possible similar to himself. If, therefore, anyone receives this most principal cause of generation and the world from wise and prudent men, he will receive him in a manner the most perfect and true. For as the divinity was willing that all things should be good, and that as much as possible nothing should be evil, hence, receiving everything visible, and which was not in a state of rest, but moving with confusion and disorder, he reduced it from this wild inordination into order, considering that such a conduct was by far the best. For it neither ever was lawful nor is for the best of causes to produce any other than the most beautiful of effects. In consequence of a reasoning process, therefore, he found that among the things naturally visible, there was nothing, the whole of which, if void of intelligence, could ever become more beautiful than the whole of that which is endued with intellect. And at the same time, he discovered that it was impossible for intellect to accede to any being without the intervention of soul. Hence, as the result of this reasoning, placing intellect in soul and soul in body, he fabricated the universe, that thus it might be a work naturally the most beautiful and the best. In this manner, therefore, according to an assimilative reason, it is necessary to call the world an animal, endued with intellect, and generated through the providence of divinity. This being determined, let us consider what follows. And in the next place, after the similitude of what animals the composing artificer constituted the world. Indeed, we must by no means think that he fashioned it similar to such animals as subsist in the form of a part, or have a partial subsistence. For if it had been assimilated to an imperfect animal, it certainly would not have been beautiful. but we should rather establish it as the most similar of all things to that animal, of which other animals, both considered separately and according to their genera, are nothing more than parts. For this indeed contains all intelligible animals comprehended in itself, just as this world contains us and the other animals, which are the objects of sight. For the divinity, being willing to assimilate this universe in the most exquisite degree to that which is the most beautiful and every way perfect of intelligible objects, he composed it one visible animal, containing within itself all such animals as are allied to its nature. Do we therefore rightly conclude that there is but one universe? Or is it more right to assert that there are many and infinite? But indeed, there can be but one. If it be only admitted that it is fabricated according to an exemplar. For that which comprehends all intelligible animals can never be second to any other. For another animal again would be required about these two, of which they would be parts, and it would be more proper to assert that the universe is assimilated to this comprehending third rather than to the other two, that the world, therefore, from its being singular or alone, might be similar to all perfect animal. On this account, the artificer neither produced two nor infinite worlds, but heaven, or the universe, was generated and will be one and only begotten. But since it is necessary that a corporeal nature should be visible and tangible, and since nothing can be visible without fire, and nothing tangible without something solid, and nothing solid without earth, hence the divinity, beginning to fabricate, composed the body of the universe from fire and earth. But it is impossible for two things alone to cohere together without the intervention of the third, for a certain collective bond is necessary in the middle of the two. And that is the most beautiful of bonds, which renders both itself and the natures which are bound remarkably one. But the most beautiful analogy naturally produces this effect. For when either in three numbers or masses or powers, as is the middle to the last, so is the first to the middle. And again, as is the last to the middle, so is the middle to the first. Then the middle becoming both first and last, and the last and the first passing each of them into a middle position, they become all of them necessarily the same as to relation to each other, but being made the same with each other are all one. If then it were necessary that the universe should be a superficies only and have no depth, one medium would indeed be sufficient, both for the purpose of binding itself and the natures which it contains. But now it is requisite that the world should be a solid, and solids are never harmonized together by one, but always with two mediums. Hence, the divinity placed water and air in the middle of fire and earth, and fabricated them as much as possible in the same ratio to each other, so that fire might be to air as air to water, and that as air is to water, so water might be to earth. And from this conjunction and composition, he rendered the world visible and tangible. Hence, from things of this kind, which are four in number, it must be confessed that the body of the universe was generated through analogy, conspiring into friendship with itself from their conjunction, and so aptly cohering in all its parts as to be indissoluble except by its artificer, who bound it in this union and consent. The composition of the world, therefore, received one whole of each of these four natures, for its composing artificer constituted it from all fire, water, air, and earth, leaving no part of any one of these, nor any power external to the world. For by a reasoning process he concluded that it would thus be a whole animal, in the highest degree, perfect from perfect parts, that besides this it would be one, as nothing would be left from which any other such nature might be produced. And lastly, that it would be neither obnoxious to old age nor disease. For he perceived that the heat and cold from which bodies are composed, and all such things as possess vigorous powers, when surrounding bodies externally and acceding to them unseasonably, dissolve their union, and introducing diseases and old age, cause them to perish by decay. Hence, through this cause and this reasoning process, he fabricated the universe one whole, composed from all wholes, perfect, undecaying, and without disease. He likewise gave to it a figure becoming and allied to its nature. For to the animal, which was destined to comprehend all animals in itself, that figure must be the most becoming, which contains within its ambit all figures of every kind. Hence, he fashioned it of a spherical shape, in which all the radii from the middle are equally distant from the bounding extremities, as this is the most perfect of all figures, and the most similar to himself. For he considered that the similar was infinitely more beautiful than the dissimilar. Besides this, he accurately polished the external circumference of the spherical world and rendered it perfectly smooth. Nor was the addition of eyes requisite to the universe, for nothing visible remained external to itself. Nor were ears necessary, as there was nothing externally audible. Nor was the universe invested with surrounding air that it might be indigent of respiration. Nor again was it in want of any organ through which it might receive nutriment into itself and discharge it when concocted, for there was no possibility that anything could either accede to or depart from its nature, since there was nothing through which such changes could be produced. For indeed, the universe affords nutriment to itself through its own consumption, and being artificially fabricated, suffers and acts all things in itself and from its own peculiar operations. For its composing artificer considered that it would be much more excellent if sufficient to itself than if indigent of foreign supplies. But he neither thought that hands were necessary to the world, as there was nothing for it either to receive or reject, nor yet feet, nor any other members which are subservient to progression and rest. For from among the 7 species of local motion he selected one, which principally subsists about intellect and intelligence, and assigned it to the world as properly allied to its surrounding body. Hence, when he had led it round according to same, in same, and in itself, he caused it to move with a circular revolution. But he separated the other 6 motions from the world, and framed it void of their wandering progressions. Hence, as such a conversion was by no means indigent of feet, he generated the universe without legs and feet. When, therefore, that God who is a perpetually reasoning divinity cogitated about the God who was destined to subsist at some certain period of time, he produced his body smooth and equable, and every way from the middle even and whole, and perfect from the composition of perfect bodies. But, placing soul in the middle of the world, he extended it through the whole. And besides this, he externally invested the body of the universe with soul, and, causing circle to revolve in a circle, established the world one single, solitary nature, able through virtue to converse with itself, indigent of nothing external, and sufficiently known and friendly to itself. And on all these accounts, he rendered the universe a happy God. But indeed, the artificer did not produce soul, as we just now began to say, junior to body. For he who conjoined these would never permit that the more ancient nature should be subservient to the younger. But we, as being much conversant with that which casually occurs, assert things of this kind in an assimilative way, while, on the contrary, the artificer of the world constituted soul both in generation and virtue prior to and more ancient than body, as being the proper lord and ruler of its servile nature, and that in the following manner. From an essence impartible and always subsisting according to sameness of being, and from a nature divisible about bodies, he mingled from both a third form of essence, having a middle subsistence between the two, and again, between that which is impartible and that which is divisible about bodies, he placed the nature of same and different. And taking these, now they are three, he mingled them all into one idea. But as the nature of different could not without difficulty be mingled in same, he harmonized them together by employing force in their conjunction. But after he had mingled these two with essence, and had produced one from the three, he again divided this whole into becoming parts, at the same time mingling each part from same, different, and essence. But he began to divide as follows. In the first place, he received one part from the whole. Then he separated a second part, double of the first. Afterwards, a third, sesquialter of the second, but triple of the first. And then a fourth, double of the second. In the next place, a fifth, triple of the third. A sixth, octuple of the first. And lastly, a seventh, 27 times more than the first. After this, he filled up the double and triple intervals, again cutting off parts from the whole, and placed them so between the intervals that there might be two mediums in every interval, and that one of these might by the same part exceed one of the extremes and be exceeded by the other, and that the other part might by an equal number surpass one of the extremes, and by an equal number be surpassed by the other. But as from hence sesquialter, sesquitertian, and sesquioctave intervals were produced, from those bonds in the first spaces, he filled with a sesquioctave interval all the sesquitertian parts, at the same time leaving a part of each of these. And then again, the interval of this part being assumed, a comparison is from thence obtained in terms of number to number, subsisting between 256 and 243. But now, the whole of that mixture, from which these were separated, was consumed by such a section of parts. Hence, he then cut the whole of this composition according to length and produced two from one, and adapted middle to middle, like the form of the letter X. Afterwards, he bent them into a circle, connecting them both with themselves and with each other, in such a manner that their extremities might be combined in one directly opposite to the point of their mutual intersection, and externally comprehended them in a motion revolving according to sameness, and in that which is perpetually the same. And besides this, he made one of the circles external, but the other internal, and denominated the local motion of the exterior circle the motion of that nature which subsists according to sameness, but that of the interior one, the motion of the nature subsisting according to difference. He likewise caused the circle, partaking of sameness, to revolve laterally towards the right hand, but that which partakes of difference diametrically towards the left. But he conferred dominion on the circulation of that which is same and similar, for he suffered this alone to remain undivided. But as to the interior circle, when he had divided it 6 times, and had produced 7 unequal circles, each according to the interval of the double and triple, as each of them are 3, he ordered the circles to proceed in a course contrary to each other, and 3 of the 7 interior circles he commanded to revolve with a similar swiftness, but the remaining 4 with a motion dissimilar to each other and to the former 3, yet so as not to desert order and proportion in their circulations. After, therefore, the whole composition of the soul was completed, according to the intention of its artificer, in the next place, he fabricated within soul the whole of a corporeal nature, and conciliating middle with middle, he aptly harmonized them together. But soul, being every way extended from the middle and to the very extremities of the universe, and investing it externally in a circle, at the same time herself revolving within herself, gave rise to the divine commencement of an unceasing and wise life through the whole of time. And indeed, the body of the universe was generated visible. But soul is invisible, participating of a rational energy and harmony, and subsisting as the best of generated natures through its artificer, who is the best of intelligible and perpetual beings. Since, therefore, soul was composed from the mixture of the three parts, same, different, and essence, and was distributed and bound according to analogy, herself at the same time returning by a circular energy towards herself. Hence, when she touches upon anything endued with a dissipated essence, and when upon that which is indivisible, being moved through the whole of herself, she pronounces concerning the nature of each, asserts what that is with which anything is the same, from what it is different, to what it is related, where it is situated, how it subsists. And when anything of this kind happens either to be or to suffer, both in things which are generated and in such as possess an eternal sameness of being. Reason indeed, which is becoming to be true according to sameness, when it is conversant as well with different as same, evolving itself without voice or sound in that which is moved by itself. When in this case it subsists about a sensible nature, and the circle, characterized by difference, properly revolving, enunciates any circumstance to every part of the soul with which it is connected. Then stable and true opinions and belief are produced. But when again it evolves itself about that which is logistic, and the circle of sameness, aptly revolving, announces any particular thing, intellect and science are necessarily produced in perfection by such an operation. Whoever therefore asserts that this is ingenerated in any other nature than soul, asserts everything rather than the truth. But when the generating Father understood that this generated resemblance of the eternal gods moved and lived, he was delighted with his work, and in consequence of this delight, considered how he might fabricate it still more similar to its exemplar. Hence, as that is an eternal animal, he endeavored to render this universe such to the utmost of his ability. The nature indeed of the animal, its paradigm, is eternal, and this it is impossible to adapt perfectly to a generated effect. Hence, he determined by a dianoetic energy to produce a certain movable image of eternity. And thus, while he was adorning and distributing the universe, he at the same time formed an eternal image flowing according to number, of eternity abiding in one, and which receives from us the appellation of time. But besides this, he fabricated the generation of days and nights and months and years, which had no subsistence prior to the universe. but which together with it rose into existence. And all these indeed are the proper parts of time. But the terms "it was" and "it will be," which express the species of generated time, are transferred by us to an eternal essence through oblivion of the truth. For we assert of such an essence that it was, is, and will be, while according to truth the term "it is" alone accommodated to its nature. But we should affirm that to have been and to be hereafter are expressions alone accommodated to generation, proceeding according to the flux of time. For these parts of time are certain motions, but that which perpetually subsists the same and immovable neither becomes at any time older or younger, neither has been generated in some period of the past, nor will be in some future circulation of time, nor receives any circumstance of being, which generation adapts to natures hurried away by its impetuous whirl. For all these are nothing more than species of time imitating eternity and circularly rolling itself according to number. Besides this, we likewise frequently assert that a thing which was generated is generated, that what subsists in becoming to be is in generation, that what will be is to be, and that non-being